Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, the Accelerate Productivity with Effective Search and Knowledge Across Content and People. This is a pre-SharePoint conference webinar where we want you to be in the know now. And this is part 4. If you've missed any of the previous sessions, there's a lot of great topics, and we've got a page that will certainly link you to. But we're pleased to have today a number of people here presenting. First, we're going to have Masoud Zarabian from BA Insight. He's their CEO, wanting to introduce a lot of what they offer out to the community, out to the world, and certainly what they're going to be offering at the SharePoint conference. Then you're going to hear from Bill Baer, Senior Product Manager from Microsoft, all around search and what we're doing around intelligence, and his counterpart on the engineering side, Naomi Moneypenny, who is a Principal PM Manager on the SharePoint engineering team. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Masoud Zarabian, and he'll kick us off and get us in the know with what we need to know.
Thank you, Mark, and a warm welcome to all the attendees in this webinar. If you do not know about BA Insight, we are 100% focused on what we call internal search. It also is referred to as enterprise search and recently redefined as Insight Engines market. We do not do site search. Our products are used on intranets, enterprise-wide search, and departmental search. This is our second year as a sponsor for SharePoint Conference, and I am pleased to be able to do this. We find the conference to be a great opportunity to learn about the future of SharePoint and also be able to exchange knowledge with peers, customers, and prospects who have done implementations, share problems, and learn from each other, come up with solutions. Great event to also meet each other. In addition, this year we will have multiple members of our team attending, and we'd love to talk to you about how we can help you with your enterprise search needs. Before I move on, I would also like to thank Microsoft for giving us the opportunity to present in this session with luminaries such as Bill and Naomi from Microsoft. We see the SharePoint Online Office 365 as an Insight Engine platform. It is already a great collaboration platform. Extending it to enterprise search effectively will make it a one-stop shop for information, integration with Azure Cognitive Services as AI to crawling and search, which improves the user's experience. Microsoft Graph enhances relevancy of results, and our software extends the solution to truly be boundaryless. Our connectivity software helps connect Office 365, SharePoint Online, and SharePoint On-Premise to other systems. What we do is, through that connectivity, we bring the information into the unified index, which happens to be SharePoint index. We connect to systems that are on-premise and also in the cloud with the unified index, which is a common theme that we see in the marketplace to be a powerful theme, and also one that Microsoft believes in, is something that will make the users have a much better user experience, and it also helps in terms of doing a whole bunch of other things because you can actually use the index almost as a database. Here's the list of our connectors. As you look through it, you'll see that we have a variety of connectors for systems that are, as I said, on-premise and in the cloud. We also have integrated with systems that are focused on specific verticals. For example, NetDocs is one that is heavily used in the legal market, and Bentley is a system that we see in the energy market. As you look across, you also will notice that we support both on-premise and SaaS systems. Lastly, we develop all the new connectors as standard connectors. We do not do custom connectors. We believe that for enterprise search, the right approach is to be able to use a connector that is developed as standard product, supported, maintained, upgraded. We also have an auto classification product as a module of our solution, which automatically applies intelligence to all content, independent of it in SharePoint or not. In fact, it works well with our connectors in that we can tag information as it gets added to the SharePoint index. It is an innovative approach which combines AI and rule-based document analysis and classification. Through that process, We can meta tag information beyond text, including image, video content, OCRs, etc. With that said, I'll pass the baton to Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Masood, for sharing a little bit of information about what we can expect from BA Insight, both at the SharePoint conference and beyond. We appreciate your continued support for the event and your investments in Insights engines. So speaking of Insights engines, today we wanted to talk a little bit about Microsoft Search in Microsoft 365 through today's webinar. So before we get into Microsoft Search and intelligent discovery, let's talk a little bit about Microsoft 365 so we can kind of lay the stage as to what you can expect throughout the rest of this webinar. So Microsoft 365 is really our intelligent complete solution, which includes Office 365, Windows 10, and enterprise mobility and security. So effectively, Microsoft 365 is designed to empower everyone to be creative and work together securely across a number of core pillars. The first one is unlocking creativity, which is really giving your workforce AI-powered tools that unleash creativity and innovation. The second is building for teamwork, really inspiring better ways to bring people together so they can get more work done. The third, intelligent security, increasing agility and lowering costs by making technology easier to adopt and manage. And then lastly, intelligent security, really harnessing the power of intelligent security to protect your company's assets with minimal disruption. So it's really balancing the needs of IT and those of users. All of this is important because our world is rapidly transforming around us. The amount of data each of us must process, time, day over day, hour over hour, minute over minute, is ever increasing. So in fact, the total amount of content in the world is doubling every 2 years, and people are spending approximately 20% of their time looking for information, and 60% of those individuals are claiming to be missing pieces of key data to make decisions daily. All of us really have to manage a number of increasing processes, systems, and often we have to do that while on the go. And if you think about it, looking at accelerating content at scale, by 2020, we anticipate having 44 zettabytes of data. As you start to crunch the numbers and really assume that each one of those zettabytes is a single gigabyte file, there would effectively be more files in 2020 than there are stars in the sky. So if you think about it, that's a wealth of data. So more and more businesses are investing in intelligent technology to help address these trends. 52 billion in cognitive services and artificial intelligence, almost 18 billion in computer vision, and 58 billion in machine learning. So as you can see, not only is data growing exponentially, but also the investment in addressing that. Did you have a comment, Mark?
No, you're all good.
Great. At the same time, the workplace is changing as well. So not only are we seeing trends in the explosion of data, but we're also seeing an explosion in the investment of addressing how we can access and process all of that data. But at the same time, the third aspect of this is that our workplaces are really changing time over time. So while the amount of data is growing exponentially, we're really still bound by time. That's the one thing we can't purchase more of. So discovering information can be challenging because we're limited by the amount of time that we have. So people expect search to work with them now, beyond just the presentation of a bunch of blue links on a page. People want knowledge as opposed to just data. So after all, if you think about it, the best run companies today are really supporting decision making at the edge, and search needs to evolve to embrace this new workplace and to embrace these trends. A lot of that is because users are increasingly turning to search to accomplish key tasks and make decisions. So over half of the internet population today starts their internet experience with a search engine. As much as we like to start each day with Outlook as our gateway into email and conversations, people are starting their internet experience from search. So searching is the most popular online activity today behind email. And what we're going to talk about over the course of the next hour or so is Microsoft Search, really transforming search to empower you everywhere. What Microsoft Search does is it empowers user productivity, and it also saves them time by finding the information they need to accomplish key tasks and do their job. Microsoft Search is designed to allow you to search across all of your enterprise content across Microsoft 365 through a more consistent experience across multiple Microsoft entry points. So you can search wherever you're working, be it via a browser, an application, or on your mobile device via applications there. Microsoft Search is built on the graph and Bing technology, and it's really designed to deliver more relevant, personalized experiences, as well as being secure for the enterprise. So with that said, we're going to pause for a moment. I'm going to transition to Naomi, and we're going to dig into what exactly is Microsoft Search. What are these key terms that you've been hearing? Natural language understanding, processing, generation. Where does it all fit? So Naomi, you have the floor.
Naomi, you're on mute still.
So I want to say I'm really excited. Thank you so much, Bill, to talk about Microsoft Search and all of the things that we're doing. I wanted to sort of take us on a little history lesson first. I think it's helpful to think about this in context. As many of us go into SharePoint conference, we've been in SharePoint for a very long time. And so you might be thinking, how is this different from all the other search efforts we've had before? And how does this sort of coordinate with maybe the on-premises infrastructure I have and maybe some of the investments that I've already made as a company? So let's do a little history tour, Bill, because this will be fun. So if you wind your mind back to 2008, that's actually when we acquired Fast Search. And so many customers had invested in Fast. It was an add-on on top of SharePoint Server, and you could do great things with that. And with that acquisition of Fast Search, it was really looking at kind of the way that we could get a whole bunch of content sources and actually bring that into SharePoint Server. And it was a great way to sort of think about the architecture of that connectedness, thinking about how you could get different content sources, how could I bring it into a central index, and it kind of helped to formulate some of the early roots of what we're doing. Now, with that acquisition of Fast Search, we wound the clock back, 2008, going to 2009 into 2010. One of the things that really came out of that acquisition was this idea of the graphing capabilities that we have as part of the Microsoft Graph. And way back then, we called it the Office Graph. And it's really that way of thinking about the graph that is the messages, the meetings, the content, the people you interact with, the organizational structure, the tasks, the events, all of that content that you interact with every single day. And so we really took that very united view, and it was really still quite early if you think back to 2010, really looking at this holistically across what you're doing in the suite. So we moved from just Fast Search being associated with SharePoint and trying to have that one place for everything, to really thinking about how could we use all of the collaboration signals that we have across the suite and actually bring that together. And so if I take all of that information we have in the graph, we realized there was still something missing. And so when you get into like 2012, that was the acquisition of Yammer. And you think about Yammer there as kind of that social signals. So prior to this, we were using collaboration signals that were things like opening documents, reading documents, modifying those documents. You close the documents, you were in a meeting with somebody. But with that social signal, it actually helps much more in terms of conversational knowledge, how people are sharing links, for example, and then even looking at the World Wide Web in terms of the open graph signals that were coming in. So when people shared a link, for example, that was out to the web, we were able to put that inside of the Microsoft Graph. And so that history of how we've been building this graph really transcends over not just what we did at SharePoint originally, now thinking about more the scope across Office 365. And then you saw us way back in 2014 have the first big application that we had on the Microsoft Graph, and that was Delve. And so Delve was kind of that great place to see everything from email attachments to Yammer links to being able to see content in SharePoint across OneDrive, all of that information in a very rich area. You also saw us talk about people and sort of the profile information there. And so this idea of having one people profile, being able to put in your skills and your expertise, that was all part of that journey too. And so as we've been through this journey and sort of its evolution, hopefully you can see how it's built up over time. So we've gone from that Fast acquisition, 2008, it's already 11 years ago. It doesn't feel that long, but it really is. And then really working through to the Office Graph, it's now called the Microsoft Graph, and on all of the applications that are built on top of that Microsoft Graph. And so when we talk about search as an experience, it's just one of those things, right? A lot of the amazing experiences that we have for personalization inside of Office 365 are driven by those signals inside of the Microsoft Graph. So whenever I see something like, the most recently used files, for example, or, it prompts me to share a file after I've been in a meeting, those signals are all part of that Microsoft Graph. And that same search experience is basically capturing all of that data and processing all of that data too. So I thought it's just worth to sort of recap sort of where we've been on that journey. And I wanted to show you a couple of things in terms of just the personalization angle of what we've been doing. And so personalization is something we've worked really, really hard on and as part of the Microsoft Graph. And we want to think about, the ways that we're personalizing search for you. And so we've really transitioned from this kind of epic sort of ability to do pattern matching inside of documents. We want to, build on all this semantic technology that we have. But really, when you want a search result, it's all about you. So thinking about the refinding technology, for example, oftentimes people are searching for stuff they already have looked for before. And so we want to sort of get that depth of personalization and build that into every single experience that you're having. So I'm going to start out here in office.com. And if you haven't visited office.com in a while, I do encourage you to look at this. So you'll see at the top here, we have, the applications that you have access to. We have, documents that you've most recently interacted with. And these are actually recommendations. And these recommendations, again, are powered by the graph, and they're powered by the context of the information in there. So, for example, if somebody's commented in there, or maybe they've updated something after I last looked at it, it'll actually push it as a recommendation to me. And the reason for this is to help you to find the content that you need the most, right? It's actually trying to monitor and help you, and the Microsoft Graph is trying to be that brain and help you with what you need inside of your organization. So you can see in this case, I've got a bunch of recommendations. These are based on files that I've looked at recently, and that's been a helpful thing for me. You can also see across the side here that we have, recent ones. We have things that have been shared with me, and I also have a discovery feed too. And so this is super helpful, especially in the shared with me thing. This is something I use all the time, and I'm sure we all do it too. The shared with me is really powered by things that people have recently shared from PowerPoint. Maybe they shared something in a meeting, maybe they shared an Excel file with me, and you always have that feeling of like, oh, I know Bill or Mark, they gave me a chart, or I remember they shared something in the meeting with me, but it's really hard for me to sort of look back and find that information through my email or wherever else. If you look over in the shared with me tab, it'll always be in there, and it's really helpful just to find that information. You looked at it a couple of days ago, and you want to find it again. We also have in here the discovery feed, and that discovery feed is again from across the suite. So you're seeing here things that the Microsoft Graph thinks is useful to you. And so I want to sort of make sure here that we understand that all of the results that we see as part of the Microsoft Graph are security trimmed. So everything, you only have the recommendations, the discovery, all of this aspect, the things that you're searching for, it's always security trimmed to what you have access to. So you won't be recommended or suggested something that you don't have access to. And you can see the reason a little bit here in terms of why I'm being recommended this. So for example, I can see that my colleagues have been working on these files, they've been editing these things, and so it could be something that's useful to me, even though I may not have directly already viewed it. And so having that sort of powerful interaction is really important. So when I look through here, you can see, of course, the scope of the apps across the top. In this case, in office.com, we actually have all these different apps that you have access to. And this is kind of a great way to just learn about, here's all the stuff that you have with your Office 365 suite. And if you click on that explore all of your apps area, that's where you'll actually see all of the things that you have access to. But what's really worth mentioning here is that wonderful search bar at the top. So as Bill mentioned, this is kind of really that upgrade, if you will. So our new search bar is really getting superpowers across the entire suite. So as Bill said, we have Office 365, Windows 10, and Enterprise Mobility and Security as part of what we're doing with Microsoft 365. So this search bar that you see at the top of the suite is coming everywhere. And I really do mean everywhere, right? So we want to reinforce that because we look at SharePoint, we look at OneDrive, maybe look at Yammer, at Outlook, at Teams, at PowerPoint, at Word, Excel, all of those things. They're all getting this one search bar across the entire suite. And so even though you just see it here in terms of office.com, it is something that's coming across the entire place. And so something to really think about as you're working and sort of thinking about maybe your intranet redesign or thinking about the design of the experiences you're going to have further. That search bar is going to be omnipresent there. So oftentimes we're trying to build a lot of sites or content and have to think about where we're going to include the search box, but recognize that it's going to be hidden, it's going to be in that suite bar, and so it will be there all the time. So it's not something like people are going to lose it on the page or something, it's definitely going to be part of that suite bar. Okay, so when I do a sort of click into this search box here, this is kind of a great technology just to sort of show that personalization that's happening. So as soon as I click into this search box, I'm already getting results, right? And you're like, how is it doing that, right? It's kind of amazing, right? It's like, how am I clicking in here and it's actually finding results for me? So in this case, you can see I've got applications that I work with the most. In this case happens to be Outlook. I've got files that are coming up, I've got people, and I've got sites. And so, because this is a demo tenant, you see some interesting results as part of this, but it's all good. So it's sort of that idea of like being able to find things that I was recently working on. So if I was to search, for example, if I start typing in Mark, it could be Mark Cashman as a person, but it could also just be looking at a subject matter area. And so as I start that search, you can see it's giving me recommendations. It's actually trying to file down the list for me because it's looking at my personal signals and what's most relevant to me. But I can go ahead and execute, something for marketing. I could look at people results, I could look at site results, but I'll go ahead and do the query for marketing in this case. So when I see that search results page, this is something we showed, way back in 2017, actually, is when we first announced this around personalized search and how we're driving that. So you can see here, I've got results that are both a site, I've got content, and I've got people all the way through this. So when I look at this page, I'm seeing a whole bunch of results because it's trying to help me disambiguate what the term marketing means. Am I looking for a site? Am I looking for a person? And so the things that are highest confidence in terms of what it thinks the category of the result is are at the top of the page. So if I was to search for Mark, and it could be a Mark, as a name, it will be actually showing me a people profile first. In this case, it thinks I'm probably looking for a site, so it actually shows me the result for the marketing first, the marketing site first here. And so it's important to recognize the sort of the personalization that's happening here. The ranking of the results on this page are really about understanding your signals in the graph. So when I scroll through this page, I have, a certain scope of results that I have access to, right? And that's very important for what I do. But I also can see, a whole bunch of content in here. But the ranking of those results in this case is personalized for me. So even if Bill had exactly the same access to the amount of content that I have, his result list would look a little different based on his collaboration patterns inside of your organization. And so it's that truly personalized search. It's a really important feature of what we're building here and sort of understanding where that's coming from. So when I click out this little card here, we think about this as kind of a great way to be able to preview documents right here inside of the window. So you'll see that I get a live preview over on the side here. In this case, I can look through, it's a Word document, but I can actually look to over 300 different file types. So that preview capability is built into all of the search experiences that you have. And it doesn't matter if you're accessing this through office.com, if you're accessing this in SharePoint, etc. It's that same preview capability inside of OneDrive everywhere else. So over 300 different file types means that I can see everything from Adobe Photoshop to Illustrator to AutoCAD files to all kinds of stuff inside of my organization. So being able to have that live preview is really helpful. So I can really check out that this is the document that I'm looking for before I click through on all of this. Same thing here is true for people profiles. So in this case, I can see, Megan Bowen's profile. I get that live people card. It's a great experience that we have across the suite. And it also helps me to understand how I can find content through people as well. So when I look at Megan's profile here and it's like, okay, well, I remember that she shared something with me in a meeting, but I don't remember exactly what to search for. So I can actually look at her extended people card. If I click through here, I'll see actually all of the files that I have access to that she's recently shared with me. So this is a really cool way of thinking about how do I find content. So for example, if Bill shared something with me, we often remember as people that it's a person, right, that they do that, and then we don't remember the actual name. But wouldn't it be just helpful if I could just go to Bill's profile and find all the content? Well, here it is, right? So in this case, I can actually do a search and, I can start filtering the results directly in here, and then I can check out those results here too. And I get that same capabilities. I can sort of do a link here. I can find it very simply and fast as part of my organization's results. So it helps me to narrow down very quickly and to find things through people. So that personalization is working hard for us inside of the Microsoft Graph. So I can also check out Megan's profile more generally here. So for example, if I was prepping for a meeting or I was just trying to remember where she fits, for example, in the organizational structure, I have her people card, and that people card is that same experience that we have across the suite. So regardless of whether I'm working inside of SharePoint or in OneDrive, or if I'm in Office.com, or if I'm in Word or Excel, I can see all of those results too. And so the organizational structure is there, again, that same people card. You know, people oftentimes look this up in Outlook, for example, but you can actually get access to this everywhere across the suite. And so I think it's just helpful to understand all of that capability that's being driven by the graph. And so all of that is available for you to work on top of. So when we look at the About Me here, we can see that Megan's filled out her profile, but she can actually add in here also skills, expertise, interest areas, her educational background, and all of that is searchable through the Microsoft Graph as well. So I think it's helpful just to sort of recap like the journey we've been on and the personalization features that we're really driving as part of what we're doing with Microsoft Search. Okay, so Bill, I wanted to talk a little bit about a few things here. So I think it's helpful to sort of take some of the mystery out, as you were mentioning, of some of those terms. So when we talk about things like natural language processing and natural language understanding, that's really a lot of where that Bing technology is coming in from. And so with Microsoft Search, we're saying it's just not all of those different applications that we want to make searchable, but we actually want to make it even better for you as an experience. So we've got that deep personalization that's coming from the Microsoft Graph, but then we have all of this great Bing technology that's coming in that helps us to understand the context of the world around us. And so Bing, I was to think about this from a perspective, Bill, of what do you think sort of, you know, some of the common problems that people have with searching right now inside of the intranet, maybe the kinds of terms that they're using. Perhaps you could share a little bit about that.
Sure. So let's go ahead and, if you wouldn't mind, if I could just share my screen real quick. Particularly, let's talk a little bit about the Bing portion of this, since you had brought it up a couple of times during the conversation. So I will go ahead and bring up Bing. And as we mentioned earlier in the presentation itself, we talked a little bit about Bing, or Microsoft Search, being kind of the culmination of Bing and graph technologies. Naomi showed you a couple of examples in Office.com, being able to get back to your work quicker, being able to find the files that are both important to you, that were, you know, where you were collaborating with partners within your team or outside of your team, but really the ability to get back to your work quicker. So that's kind of an example of how Search works with you. Bing is another entry point for Microsoft Search. So as we mentioned, across Microsoft, there's multiple entry points to the Microsoft Search experience. So let me give you a couple of examples here via Bing, how it can be used as an entry point from a search perspective. So if you think about the way that people are searching today via their browser, most people today don't navigate to the discrete endpoint for a particular search engine. So be it Bing, be it Google, DuckDuckGo, whatever the search engine is of preference, people generally don't navigate to the search homepage and execute their searches there. Generally what we see in today is that people are executing their search or starting their search journey via the address bar itself. So you can imagine from a search perspective, what people are doing is starting in the address bar and entering their search queries. We're going to go ahead and start here in Bing and just give you an example of some of the searches that you can perform. So let's go ahead and look at two concepts, intent and location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for Dan's office. So here I am in Bing searching for Dan's office. So you'll notice what happens is I get both work and life knowledge for Dan's office. But a couple of things that you see happening on my screen here. You see both intent in that search is intelligent enough to understand Dan Holm is who I'm looking for. So I didn't enter Dan Holm's office or my coworker Dan Holm's office. What I entered was Dan's office, and it understood the intent and it gave me the correct result set. So Dan Holm is who it brought me to. And not only did it bring me to Dan Holm, but you can see here, it's showing me Dan Holm's office location. So via the simplicity of uploading something as similar, something as like as a DWG to SharePoint or OneDrive, it's able to extract the metadata from that and actually give me precise location of Dan's office. So as you can see, I have Dan's office here, and I can get directions via Bing quickly to Dan's office. It's also making additional recommendations from a people search perspective to me as well, Dan Kogan and Daniel Ward. So to give you another example of a query I could execute, I could say Dan's org. And again, intent, but also organizational results. So what I can get is by searching for Dan's org, as you can see, it takes me to the organizational results. So I can see Dan's organization. The great part about Bing is it provides a holistic view of entities across Microsoft 365. So not only can I get Dan's people profile, but I can get back to those files that Dan and I had collaborated on, or those files that I have access to that Dan had shared with me. I can get the organizational results as well as the group results, the office location, but I can also dive into conversations as well. So if I wanted to get back to a conversation that Dan and I were having, be it in Yammer or be it on Teams, I can quickly get back to those conversations that Dan and I have had. So on many occasions, you may be getting ready to pack up for the evening and head home from work. So as soon as you start closing the lid to your laptop, or as soon as you get in your car on your mobile device, you may get a prompt via Microsoft Teams or Yammer that somebody mentioned you in a conversation or that somebody's trying to reach you. So one of the challenges with that is you may be trying, you may not recall that by the time you actually get home, you have dinner, and at the end of the evening you recall, I did get a message from somebody on Teams, or somebody was trying to contact me, or I recall there was 3 or 4 Yammer conversations throughout the course of the day that had mentioned me. Using a conversation search, you can quickly get back to those conversations. So again, this was an example of intent. Now, thinking about attributes, maybe I want to search for somebody based on their attributes, and I'm new to the company and I'm trying to understand the organization. I'm trying to grow my network. So a great example of an attribute search is I can search for something as simple as Jeff the CVP. So when I get results for Jeff the CVP, or searching for Jeff the CVP, if I do this in office.com, I can actually get results for Jeff Teeper or Jeff in building 36. And we'll take a look at that here in a moment. One of my favorite things, though, is machine reading comprehension. So this is the idea of finding the passage in a document that most appropriately responds to a question that I'm asking of search. And this is an example of search working with you as opposed to just presenting you links. So a great example of that is, can I bring my dog to work? So as you can see here, I've got my organizational result, and it actually gives me results from policy. So from a policy document, I can actually, machine reading comprehension can crack open that document, find the right passage within that document, and actually give me the right result. So something as simple as, can I bring my dog to work, actually gives me a response, a meaningful response. It doesn't just give me a static blue link that takes me to a document that perhaps contains the query that I'm attempting to execute. Using machine reading comprehension, it can actually extract the right information and present that to me as an answer via search. Or what are the treehouse hours? And everybody's familiar with the Microsoft Treehouse by now. It's extremely popular on the Microsoft campus. So what are the Treehouse meeting space hours? Perhaps I want to schedule a meeting in the Treehouse, which is pretty popular. And as you can see, I can actually get those hours here. So again, it's able to extrapolate that information from a location within the intranet and give me the right result set. So it's a really powerful experience via using Bing as an entry point, because it's just so natural for people to want to execute a query within a search engine. But in many cases, what we're finding out is when people are typing things in the address bar via the search engine, what they're actually trying to achieve is the retrieval of an organizational result as opposed to the retrieval of a life result. So by combining Bing and graph technology, what we're able to do in this particular entry point to the Microsoft search experience is work naturally with the user. And the reason that working naturally with users is so important is that we all know context switches tend to reduce adoption and usage amongst users. So the more often that you introduce something new to them to where they have to change behavior radically, they tend to adopt it and use it at a lesser degree of frequency than when you actually work with them and you build solutions around the ways that they are accustomed to working, because we all are creatures of habit. So that was kind of a quick tour of some of the things that you can do via the Bing entry point. And I'll go ahead and let Naomi kind of comment a little bit on what we're doing through some of these experiences and where this fits in to the greater scope of Microsoft Search.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. It was really helpful. So it's really great to see the kind of the way that we're using that internet technology, so that understanding of the world, right? And you mentioned about machine reading comprehension there, thinking about the ways that we're actually using that understanding of what is a pet, for example, right? Can I bring my dog to work? So in your HR policy that you have on your intranet, it probably says domestic, animal or companion animal or something like that. And so it's actually doing that sort of semantic understanding there to understand, like when I type in the word pet, that I probably mean something like domestic animal. And you might be wondering, it's like, well, how did we learn about this, right? How can we say that the word pet is something to do with, domestic animal? But in this case, it's actually using that internet knowledge, so the context of the world, and having that sort of not just syntactical understanding to know what a word is, but the semantic understanding to be able to say the synonym for this, or this may appear in organizational data as domestic animal, companion animal, etc., and be able to do that mapping towards it. So that semantic understanding is really an important part of what we're bringing to all of these Microsoft Search experiences, because we still realize, as you mentioned, Bill, it's kind of that context is important of like how we're building each of those things every day. So when we think about that context, as we talked about sort of really search being everywhere and being omnipresent. And so we've shown you the office.com endpoint with a little bit of SharePoint in there, same experience basically from a search perspective. Let's talk about the experiences that we have inside of the applications now as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and I'm going to show, in this case, the desktop. And so, and you see here, so I'm going to show you PowerPoint in this case. So in PowerPoint here, this is a really great way to actually see some of the new search innovations that we've been doing. And there's a few things that are Microsoft Search related, and then there are other pieces that are actually, more internet and consumer search related. But I think it's really helpful to see how they work from a productivity standpoint. The first thing I wanted to sort of draw your attention to is that we actually have that search bar right here now inside of the open dialog box. And so you'll see the same experience in the Office Online applications as you do right here on the PowerPoint version of desktop. So this is kind of an interesting thing to think about. Well, I need to open a file and I was recently working on it, but I can see in here that I have a search box available right here. So I can start typing in here and I'll start getting a bunch of recent presentations, and actually really helps me to find that content much faster than I would normally. And so it's very helpful sort of not having to browse through a whole bunch of folders and files just from that perspective. The other thing I want to sort of draw your attention to here is a function that's actually been inside of PowerPoint for a long time, but it's called Quick Starter. And Quick Starter is able to go off and basically mine an outline of content and bring that back to you inside of your organization. So for example, if I wanted to, just put together an overview presentation on something, I can actually mine the information out of Wikipedia and actually bring that into a bunch of slides directly here. And so this is helpful. It might be helpful for even your kids and for their homework and all those kinds of things, but it's also helpful just to sort of getting a cohesive understanding. So for example, I'll go ahead and pick this one. It says wind power in this case. It actually helps me to get a bunch of starter slides here, and so I can actually pick the kinds of content that I want inside of my presentation, and I can click next on here, and it'll actually give me some themes and some interesting looks for my content. So I can go ahead and pick these different defaults, and I'll say create this presentation. So the easiest productivity is when PowerPoint actually builds the slides for you, right? I think that's pretty awesome. So we want to be able to do that. So it actually creates that outline of these slides directly here. So as I mentioned, this is actually using that Bing technology. It's actually Wikipedia's content in this case, so it actually puts together a nice history, talks about the history of wind power, and I could use this as kind of a starter set of slides if I was doing an overview on a topic. Now that's really cool, but what if I want to actually put together some slides from the rest of my organization? Now, hopefully you've noticed at the top of the page here, we actually, inside again, that desktop version of PowerPoint, we have a search box at the top now. And so that search box allows me to not only just find content, but also to command the application itself. So we're really thinking about, instead of hunting through the ribbon for all those commands, search is actually helping you to find commands that could be useful to you inside of PowerPoint that you might not have realized. And so you'll actually see in this case, I happen to be in the middle of the deck here. And so you'll see there's actually suggestions of commands right here. So it's saying start from the beginning, maybe you want to look at the master, all that kind of stuff. So it's actually helping to understand that content and say, okay, are there things that I might need to use? It also helps me with recommendations here of things like design ideas. And so design ideas is that great work we've done that really brings a lot of AI tech in and sort of helping you become a beautiful creative person in PowerPoint, which most of us don't have those skills, but it actually helps directly in there as well. And so I can get to that capability and that command directly from the ribbon as well, and sort of understanding that Microsoft search box. Now that's all cool. All right, that's awesome. So maybe I want to actually incorporate some content that I have from across my organization. So in this case, I'm going to go to the home button and you'll see here over by the new slide option, I actually have a button that says reuse slides. And this is purpose built for understanding all of that search component, all of the organizational data that I have access to. How can I actually bring that into the deck that I'm now building? So in this case, you can see I get recency of the results here. So I'm seeing on the side, these are files that I've been interacting with recently. And so that's that personalization being driven through the graph. This content is stored in SharePoint and OneDrive. And so it's showing me all of those options here. And so I could go grab, for example, a slide out of our current presentation, the one that we were showing earlier, and I could easily say choose those slides, and then I can actually look through all the different slides and I say, okay, I really like this slide on the technologies, so I'm going to go ahead and insert that directly into my deck. So I can do a search here instead of having to go off and open a browser window, look through a bunch of content, try to find the right PowerPoint, open it up, copy and paste the slide over. I can just do all of those actions directly inside of what we're doing in PowerPoint. And so from a productivity standpoint, we think about building these experiences in. We want search to be everywhere, right? It should meet you everywhere and it should bring you all of that content that you need and to be able to find it in the context of what you're doing. The same thing is true for people results. So if I wanted to search for a person here, I'm able to do that and easily share this deck once I've created it inside of my organization. So I can see all of that great content and I'm able to create a slide much better and much faster than I was able to do before. Now, we talked about sort of all of these different experiences. We talked about the conversational knowledge that's coming in, perhaps from Teams and Yammer, which you get to see in the Microsoft Search and Bing experience right now. We also have looked at, how this works inside of maybe the desktop versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. Same thing for all of the online versions. Same thing for the mobile versions as well. But I wanted to show you one more search experience that we've built in, which is really looking at Windows. So over on the side here, I'm a strange person that I have my Windows taskbar on the side, so forgive me for that. Hopefully you guys can see that, but it's the same taskbar that we all have access to. So if I click open on the Windows bar here, or I could actually just start typing inside of Windows, and I'm going to do a similar query to what Bill showed you with Microsoft Search and Bing. So I'm going to start typing for the word Rob in this case. And so I could be looking for a person, I could be looking for, a piece of information inside of my documents, but I could also be looking for an acronym and other things as well. So in this case, I can start searching for Rob, and it's looking for, in this case, Rob Common. And it pings up Rob Common because it's the person I work with the most called Rob inside of Microsoft. But there are others kind of, search suggestions in here too. So the people I work with, Robin Thomas, Roberta, etc. I also see, other Microsoft suggestions in here as well. So I could look for Rob, but I could also say Rob's office, and it'll actually find that Rob's office directly in there as well. So it's that same people card experience, right? So I see that same people card that you saw in office.com that we just showed you in sort of the Microsoft Search and Bing experience. And here it is, the same thing is happening inside of Windows. So it's looking for Rob's office, and I find the floor plan to Rob's office, and I can check out exactly where he's based in there as well. Now I can also do that same search and look for, content that's inside of SharePoint too. So I could do a search for, I don't know, marketing. I'm just going to look for that, for example. I'm going to see in this case that I get a bunch of results. And so these different kinds of results are important to help you disambiguate the query that you're looking for. So in this case, I see the top match is actually a bookmark that we have inside of the organization. And you may be familiar with these from a SharePoint perspective. These are best bets. These are called bookmarks now in what we're doing with Microsoft Search. And those best best bets or bookmarks are actually being surfaced again across the suite. So these are things here that I see a recording for. So I see Microsoft Marketing Consumer Business, so I can get directly to that area. I also see Microsoft suggestions here as well. So this is helpful to sort of look for other bookmarks and other resources that could be useful to me. And then I can also check out people who work in this area too. And I can find all kinds of content too as part of this as well. So that's the same kind of query that we would run. So inside of your organization. So I'll find search results both from the web as well as documents and content that I get from inside of SharePoint as well. So all of that same power is accessible here directly inside of both my computer from the Windows perspective, but also all of those productivity apps here too. So in this case, you can see I get documents that are being listed from my computer. I also get them from SharePoint, OneDrive, etc. as well, and I can check out that file too. So it really helps to understand like all of the different places that we're actually putting this content and putting the search box to access the content, the people, the commanding of the applications, all of that very holistically across the suite. So I wanted to pause for a second and talk a little bit, and Bill, I'll take your feedback on these ones too to understand a little bit more on the hybrid search area. So it's awesome. We've shown all these great experiences. You can see a lot more of this, of course, at SharePoint Conference. We'll have a lot more announcements there as well. But let's put ourselves in the mindset of our customers. Of maybe they have SharePoint on-prem, maybe they have a hybrid environment right now, and they're still looking to move a lot of that cloud either to the graph or at least make it searchable in the graph so they can take advantage of all of these great Microsoft search capabilities. So, I want to sort of talk about that hybrid situation. So would you give some recommendations perhaps on how they could, leverage the existing technology that we have for hybrid environments to make those, those search experiences light up for them in Microsoft Search?
Yeah, I think taking advantage of Microsoft Search is, a process that is really built around the way the velocity at which you can bring your content to the cloud. And perhaps there's varying degrees of velocity for organizations. We know for many organizations the cloud just isn't a lift and shift proposition. It takes time to understand the content that you have. You want to make sure that the right content is showing at the right time. You want to have a plan for archiving content that perhaps isn't the best content to bring to the cloud. Perhaps it's just retention content that you need to keep for 10, 15 or longer years. So in order to address it, we have a number of different ways that you can take advantage of Microsoft Search. The best way to take advantage of Microsoft Search, of course, is preceded by migration. And there's a number of different ways that you can migrate your content to Microsoft 365. You can leverage our fast track onboarding engine for assistance, both migrating to Microsoft 365, as well as useful tips, tricks, and more for adoption and usage within the organization. So that really helps you get up to speed quickly, not only by getting your content there, by activating the users inside of your organization to help ensure that you're achieving success with your investments. The second way is we have a free migration tool as well, the SharePoint migration tool. So if you have content in file shares, OneDrive for Business, or SharePoint sites for SharePoint Server 2013, you can migrate that content to OneDrive for Business in Microsoft 365 or SharePoint Online for free using the SharePoint migration tool. So a simple and quick way to perform self-service migrations where you want to bring content quickly and cost effectively to the service. And then the third way that we're really focusing on right now is the hybrid approach. So you can leverage our cloud search service application with SharePoint Server 2013, SharePoint Server 2016, and SharePoint Server 2019 to enable the Microsoft search experience for your users. So really delivering one single search experience. And this is the search experience that doesn't necessarily require a migration itself, because effectively what you're doing with the cloud search service application is you're indexing the content on premises and then sending that metadata to Office 365. So effectively the net result of this experience is that you have a single index inside of Office 365 that's representative of both your on-premises as well as your content inside of the service itself. That unified index experience presents you with one single search surface for both executing queries as well as the impending results from the execution of those queries. So you actually have affinity between both the on-premises content as well as the content that you're storing inside of the surface. That's a completely different approach than we've had traditionally with hybrid services. The hybrid services used to be either an inbound unidirectional experience, an outbound unidirectional experience, or a bidirectional experience. However, in either of those experiences, you had two discrete silos of data for your index. You had your index on premises and your index in the cloud. So effectively what it was a federation experience. You would execute a query, the query would be sent to two discrete locations, and the results would come back, and there was no affinity between those. So there was no relevance between those particular pieces of content that you're retrieving as a result of the search experience. So one of the quickest ways to bring the on-premises content into the Microsoft Search experience is by to implement the cloud search service application. And it's super easy to use because effectively all you're doing is provisioning a search service application and selecting one button that provisions it as the cloud search service application. And to make it even easier, if you're in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, just go to the SharePoint Admin Center, and there's a configure hybrid option on the lower left navigation suite of options. And this effectively will implement the cloud search service application or a hybrid search experience on your behalf. So really easy to take advantage of and really quickly to get there. One last thing I wanted to show you real quick, and then we'll go back to Naomi for her thoughts on the conversation, is I'm just going to go back to office.com. It was one that I wanted to show you, but I didn't get a chance in Bing because we moved on to some other experiences. So if you recall, one of the things that I had mentioned was this idea of an attribute search. Naomi had showed office.com a little bit earlier, showed the applications, and so showed the discovery surface and some of those things. But let's say I wanted to search again, since I didn't get a chance to show you, Jeff the CBP. So as you can see, it was intelligent enough to know that I'm looking for Jeff Teeper. And these type of searches are critical in large organizations. So another example is perhaps I'm working in building 34. And somebody sends me an email and says, you should talk to Naomi about that. I'm new to the company and I'm not sure who Naomi is. There's a lot of Naomis that could potentially exist inside of Microsoft. But by using search, I can start to narrow this down and figure out who I should talk to. So I knew I had a search conversation with Rob. And what I'm trying to figure out now is Rob told me to talk to Naomi. So very simply, I can search for Naomi in building 34, the building that I work in. And as you can see, search was smart enough to show me Naomi Moneypenny. So now I know who I can have that conversation with. So it's a really exciting way to be able to discover content, people, and conversations by using, natural queries. And by that interpretation, by that attribute search, I'm able to find people quickly that I may not otherwise have been able to find. And I use this quite frequently because a lot of times I do get emails that say, hey, you should talk to Rob. And if you open up the global address list and you search for Rob, the chances are you're going to get thousands of results. You're going to get the Robs, the Roberts, people that have, ROB in their name. You're going to get acronyms such as Rhythm of Business. So really, you need to be able to narrow that down to an individual. So by a simple search such as Rob, the program manager, perhaps that's who they told me to talk to, or Rob in building 1. They told me, to talk to that individual. So very quickly, I can use search to help me with day-to-day tasks.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point. So thanks so much, Bill. I appreciate that. So it's kind of good to know that we'll be able to do those experiences. The investments you have with maybe on-prem content is all part of that too. I wanted to show just a quick experience here in terms of, making that attribute search real. This is something, we do a lot of inside of our sort of everyday work. And so, in the last minute or so, we're just sort of doing a quick search, for example, in files that I have in OneDrive here. So I can actually search in this case for files that say things like, receipt, for example. And so, if I search for receipt, I'm going to get a whole bunch of content here. And some of these I've formally classified as a receipt because maybe they have the word receipt on them. But you'll see in here there's also things like images here. And so these images are actually, copies of things that I've uploaded directly into OneDrive, either from the app or from Office Lens, and saved it in there. And sort of the cool thing is here that I can see that content and it's automatically been classified as a receipt in this case, as soon as I did that upload. So if I don't even remember, for example, inside of the receipt, what was there, but maybe I don't remember the restaurant name, or maybe I remember what I ate. So if I pick on, something like hummus, for example, I remember that I had really good hummus at this place, then I can actually click on this and see inside of the receipt itself. And you'll see that the sort of text extraction has actually worked here and actually grabbed that information directly from the receipt. And so this is one of those capabilities where when we're searching for that kind of entity, right, and understanding what's in there, it's a really comprehensive way to think about how can I extract, for example, text from images as soon as I upload those into OneDrive or SharePoint, and then be able to use that across all of those different Microsoft Search results as part of that too. And so these are just some of the ways that we're thinking about sort of those productivity experiences. So hopefully that has given you an overview, at least, of all of the things that we are doing with Microsoft Search, and sort of giving you some preparation in this case in terms of what we're doing more generally. I think that's kind of at the SharePoint conference, one of the big areas that we'll be looking at is kind of the extensibility part of it. A lot of questions we get oftentimes around, what about the Enterprise Search Center inside of SharePoint? What about the customization of those personalized search pages and sort of the modern search results? We'll have a lot more to share on that at SharePoint conference. But really thinking about, how we can make this the best of both worlds, both the personalization world and that deep understanding of your own collaboration habits, as well as understanding of the world around us and bringing that together, and then having that overlay so you can really think about what's important for your company and your corporation, and really being able to push those results onto the pages as well. So that's all from me. Bill, any final parting words for our wonderful webinar attendees?
Oh, no. So again, at SPC, we'll have a lot of news around Microsoft Search. We'll talk, again, we'll provide an overview for the audience that wasn't able to join us today or learn at Ignite back in September, or even back in 2017 when we started to really trickle out some of the news around Microsoft Search and really shared our vision and strategy and the way that we see intelligent discovery evolving over the course of time at Microsoft. So we'll definitely have overview content. As Naomi mentioned, extensibility is definitely a topic that people would like to hear more about, in addition to bringing in content from additional sources. So that will be a piece of the conversation there. So we encourage you to register today. It looks like we have a slide that is coming up on that particular content, but you can go to www.sharepointconference.com. You can register there today. The event is the 21st through the 23rd for the core breakout sessions and content, and on bookending the actual breakout sessions themselves prior to and at the end of the conference are workshops. There actually is a Microsoft Search workshop. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at that workshop. It's led by one of our great MVPs that has a lot of search experience and background. So I'm sure it's going to be a great workshop that'll really help you get up to speed on Microsoft Search and how to best optimize and prepare for it. Some related sessions. We have a what's new and what's next. So we kind of teased out some of the things that we are working on today from a search perspective. You'll learn more about that. You'll also get to learn a little bit more about knowledge management goals with Sue Hanley, with Agnes, everything you wanted to know about Microsoft Search. Sebastian, building a tailored search application in modern SharePoint. And then we also have the last one there, which is connect people or curate content. That is the question. So, really what we see is search really, being, that idea of connecting people, content, conversations, and more. Really search to help you not only discover people, discover content, and discover information, but help you accomplish key tasks at the same time. So search becomes meaningful and works with you. So that's kind of my parting thoughts.
All right, so Naomi and Bill, thank you for the presentation. And we've got 2 more slides, which includes our pass giveaway. Before I hand it over to Masood to close us out, there were 3 questions that I thought were fairly quick. If we can take just a couple of seconds on each, and depending on who you'd like to answer, we can switch video. But first was a question from Marcel. Currently, we use SharePoint Search on SharePoint 2013 with custom display templates. I guess you can't change anything in Microsoft Search. They're asking about extensibility. What's our extensibility answer today and going forward, Bill or Naomi?
I guess I can jump in on that. So let's talk about that from an extensibility perspective. So as I mentioned, all of that capabilities that we have from the Microsoft Graph, we want to think about those different areas and how you want to actually use that content in your search experiences going forward. So the work that you can do, as Bill mentioned earlier, is to make that into a hybrid environment at the very least, if you're not going to migrate the content, and then use a cloud SSA, the search service application, to actually send the index results to the graph, or to at least have access to the index results to the graph. So once you've done that piece of it, right now, as I mentioned, yes, we realize that there isn't this idea of custom display templates in the modern search experiences, but we are working very hard on bringing those 2 things together. So as I mentioned, we had to work a lot on personalization and understanding you as a person. The second piece is really about understanding the sort of the world at large and how we can bring that so we can have intelligent answers that come from your intranet content and a lot more capabilities on top of that. And then that third piece is how do I overlay the organizational kind of results on there too. So it's a stay tuned. We have talked about extensibility at Ignite. It is something that we want to do from across the suite. And so we want to have the idea of maybe forming custom display templates into something more like adaptive cards. And those adaptive cards, if you look for that kind of subject area, something that goes across Office 365, because when we do that extensibility and when you show those organizational results, we want those to appear in every single search experience, not just in SharePoint, but everywhere across the suite. So when I look in PowerPoint, if I do a search in Windows, I do a search in Microsoft Search in Bing, I can see all of those extensibility results. So something we are working hard on, but we want to make the right solution and the right flexibility and customization that's available, and to do it across the entire of Microsoft 365. So more on that in May.
Excellent. So the second question comes from Anonymous. This is a very common user we have that logs into our webinars. But Anonymous number 1, it really is asking as an extension of what you were just talking about, but more specifically about content that would come from Outlook email. Do the search results today or in the plans of future, whether you're searching from one place or the other, you showed a number of entry points. Would that include users' email, specifically their email, and certainly in a privacy manner?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, everything that we have in the Microsoft Graph is security trimmed there. Currently, we don't show anything other than conversation results from Teams and Yammer. Email is something that's very much requested. We do show email attachments, obviously inside of Delve as well. So it's one of those where we are working hard on it. The question is like the signals that are produced by email. It's really great to have access to that, obviously in the search experiences, but it gets very noisy very quickly. And so we have to work hard on balancing sort of what's the right level of conversations and showing email results, and how relevant is that in the context of where you might be doing some search there. So definitely something we're working on, but it's going to take us a little bit more time to think about how we really rationalize that amount of content into other search surfaces like in PowerPoint or etc.
Wonderful. Well, there was another user named Anonymous number 2. And they were asking, really, I think where you ended your first question, but just to be sure we answer the question, for user adoption or how you explain this new technology, can we say that Microsoft Search will go everywhere, in quotes, into all the content that you have? And do we need to say that this method is something you do in a certain application or no matter where you do the search from?
Yeah, so we really think about this as being boundaryless, and we think about it in the context of where you're doing work. So in this case, that sweet bar that I showed you, that office.com search header, we showed it in PowerPoint, all of those areas, that's going to appear everywhere across the suite. So regardless of whether I'm in a desktop application, I'm working on an Excel spreadsheet, I'm going to have a search bar that accesses all of my organization's content, and specifically what I have access to, not everything that's in the entire company, but what's security trimmed for me. And so I will have that access everywhere across the suite. And I realize, you know, right now we have different experiences, right? We have it in office.com, but we're not showing it in SharePoint yet, but we will be very soon. So the more and more, you know, bear with us on the journey, and think about that suite bar being available everywhere across there, and then being able to access search from everywhere. Search as one destination is kind of a bit of a fallacy if you think about it. Sometimes I want to proactively go search for something, but if I have to go break what I'm doing and have to go open a white, you know, browser page and get a bunch of results, I've probably failed. Why not just build search everywhere into all of the applications where you're doing your work?
Excellent. Well, thank you for taking those questions, both Bill and Naomi. Masood, we're going to switch to you, and we're going to close it out with 2 slides, the one hopefully that people have been waiting for, which is pass giveaway. But Masood, I'll hand it to you.
All right, everybody, there are 2 full SharePoint Conference Pass giveaways that are available to you. The way to register is go to aka.ms/spc/webinars/pass/4. There's a form there, fill it up, and there will be drawing, and 2 people are going to get the award.
And wanted to make sure everybody knew that today's kind of a special giveaway. We've been giving away just 1 per session, but thanks to BA Insight, they've offered to have a little bit more fun today with 2 passes to be given away. So definitely submit in, and there will now be 2 chances to win.
So everybody, thank you very much for the webinar, attending the webinar. We are at booth number 626, and we have a hospitality suite at the event where prospects and customers will meet, and we invite all of you. And if you're interested, please send me an email at mzarabian@bainsight.com, and think of us as the ones who are going to continue on populating that unified index that Bill talked about with external systems, since at the end of it, you're not going to be able to migrate all content from all systems, since there are business specific systems like Vivo Vault or even Facebook that are going to be used for other purposes. Thank you very much for the time, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks, Masood. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Naomi. And thanks, attendees, for hanging out with us today to learn about search and knowledge across your intranet. Hope you have a great rest of your day, your afternoon, your evening, and we will see you at the SharePoint conference. Thanks for joining us.